The USS Barb was one of the most highly decorated submarines in U.S. history. A Gato-class warship led by Commander Eugene B. Flucky, it is credited with having sunk 17 Japanese vessels totaling more than 96,000 tons. During its 3-year run in World War II, the submarine was awarded 6 Navy Crosses, 23 Silver Stars, and 23 Bronze Stars. However, it was one last special operation that earned it the Presidential Unit Citation. In late July 1945, Commander Flucky dispatched a squad of rookie Navy Reserve sailors to plant explosives on the railroad ties of the Japanese island of Karafuto. The 8 sailors were the first Americans to set foot on the Japanese home islands, but as they hit the shore they inadvertently landed in a civilian backyard and had to improvise a new strategy. The unit was ultimately able to place the explosives and blow up the train, going down in history as the only time a U.S. naval submarine crew sank an enemy train. American submarines proved their effectiveness during the Pacific theater of World War II, emulating German tactics to sink Japanese warships and other pivotal targets that crippled Japan's economy until its surrender in August 1945. After, the Japanese bombed the American Pacific Fleet at Pearl Harbor in December 1941. The Western forces rapidly recovered and retaliated with relentless momentum. Still, the Japanese were able to occupy the Philippines and almost every island in the Pacific, though their expansion plans were brought to an abrupt halt after the setback at the Battle of Midway in the summer of 1942. The Japanese could not afford to risk their Imperial Navy in another open fight against the U.S. After the Allied victory at Guadalcanal in early 1943, General Douglas MacArthur knew that America would have to fight its way into mainland Japan by conquering and isolating every fortified Japanese island in the Pacific, and U.S. Navy submarines would play a pivotal role. As part of the unified American strategy, submarine crews patrolled the Pacific hunting enemy warships and supply convoys. The objective was to cut off sea supply lines that delivered goods to Imperial Army soldiers dug in across the Philippines, the Solomon Islands, and, more importantly, the Sea of Japan. The USS Barb was one of the submarines that joined the fight. After conducting multiple war patrols in the Atlantic and Mediterranean, the Gato-class submarine was launched on April 2, 1942, and commissioned 3 months later. Its first war patrol began on October 20th, starting a 3-year run that lasted until the war officially ended. During its 12 total patrols, the USS Barb initially fought on the European front before being sent to the Pacific theater. By early 1945, it had sunk 17 enemy vessels amounting to roughly 90,000 tons, one of the most formidable records of any submarine during World War II. Upon completion of its 11th war patrol, the Barb was upgraded with a 112mm rocket launcher at the request of its commander, Eugene B. Flucky, becoming one of the first submarines to expand its arsenal with that type of weaponry. But it was its final war patrol, when the USS Barb was sent to the Sea of Japan, that secured its place in history. On July 19, 1945, Commander Flucky spotted a railroad running near the coastline of Otosamu in Patience Bay, Karafuto. Over the following days, he analyzed the tracks and noted train schedules. Flucky observed trains bringing resources and war assets to transport ships and prepared a plan to cut off the supply line once and for all. The USS Barb had no trouble sinking cargo ships at sea during previous patrols, but Flucky reasoned they could eliminate Japanese supplies earlier, before they were even loaded, by striking on land with one decisive blow. Flucky called a war room meeting and laid out his daring plan to the crew. The objective was to deliver a decisive blow to the train while protecting the sailors' lives. The few selected men could not simply run onto the tracks, plant explosive charges, and wait for the train. Japanese guards would swarm the area in minutes and the shore party would be overrun and captured. No crew member had lost their life under Flucky's command, and he intended to keep it that way. A possible solution, and the key to the plan's success, came from electrician's mate 3rd Class Billy R. Hatfield. Commander Flucky later wrote in his autobiography, Thunder Below, that Hatfield's idea was based on memories from his early years in Ohio. Hatfield recalled placing nuts between railroad ties when rails sagged as trains passed. The shells would crack. He proposed creating a micro-switch placed between 2 ties to detonate a bomb as the train passed. Flucky approved, and Hatfield built a 55-pound bomb from a scuttling charge. It was wired to 3 dry-cell batteries placed in a pickle can. The land torpedo was connected to the microswitch detonator that would be placed under the train rails. Hatfield offered to lead the shore party, but there was no shortage of volunteers. The men were eager to fight the Japanese and weaken their resources. According to Flucky, even a Japanese prisoner volunteered to guide them. Commander Flucky decided that 8 men would carry out the mission, so both Navy sailors and reservists would be represented. Former Boy Scouts were also selected for their survival skills. Since the squad might get lost in wild terrain and medical expertise could prove critical, Flucky wanted to lead the operation himself. But the other officers threatened to call the Pacific Fleet's principal advisor if he left the ship. He was too valuable to risk and reluctantly gave in. At midnight on July 23, 1945, the USS Barb approached the coast under cover of darkness. The improvised Navy Special Force split into 2 groups and came ashore in 2 rubber boats. For most, it was their first time fighting outside the claustrophobic walls of a submarine. Before they left the ship, Flucky told them they would wait only 3 hours before sunlight exposed the submarine, and his last words were, "Men, if you get stuck, head for Siberia, 130 miles north. Follow the mountain ranges." Lieutenant Bill Walker, the USS Barb's engineering officer, led the first group while Chief Gunner's mate Paul G. Saunders and Hatfield led the other. The remaining team members were signalman Francis Neal, Severn Cook, Very Newland, torpedo man Edward Klingel Smith, motor machinist Jim Richard, and John Markison. The commando team carried the explosive device, flashlights, binoculars, life jackets, signal guns, electrical wire, D rations, M1 Garand rifles, and Thompson submachine guns. Upon reaching the coast, 2 men stayed behind to secure the boats while the others moved inland. Unbeknownst to them, these sailors were the first Americans to set foot on the Japanese home islands. The squad first stumbled into a Japanese residential area full of thick bulrushes that cracked with every move. Lights came on, but no one emerged. The Americans quickly reorganized and pushed on toward the railroad, then fell into a 4-foot ditch and sprinted across the road toward their target. A train suddenly passed and the men sought cover. After it cleared, they set to work. One sailor climbed a water tower to watch for approaching enemies and discovered it to be an occupied lookout post, but the Japanese soldier there was asleep. He returned and urged the team to hurry. Once Hatfield planted the bomb, a dim light approached, the train. The men immediately ran across the tracks and toward the beach. At 1:47 a.m., the 16-car train exploded into a burst of flames. 5 minutes later, the entire squad was back at the coast. "Paddle like the devil," Flucky shouted as they neared the submarine. The mission was a success, and the USS Barb maintained its streak of not losing a single man during years of continuous combat. Its 12th war patrol ended on August 2, 1945, just days before the nuclear bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki prompted Japan to surrender. The USS Barb's battle flag records 12 war patrols, 5 in Europe and 7 in the Pacific, 6 Navy crosses, 23 Silver Stars, 23 Bronze Stars, a Presidential Unit Citation, and a Medal of Honor awarded to Captain Commander Flucky. The flag's most distinctive feature is a small icon at its lower bottom, a train symbolizing the USS Barb's unique feat, a masterstroke no other U.S. submarine has achieved in naval history.